Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm your host, Rebecca, and I recap live trials so you have something to listen to while you're crafting. Today, I'm going to cover day 2 of the testimony of the state of Michigan, I can talk, versus James Crumley. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but last month I covered the trial of his wife, Jennifer Crumley, and she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, which is the same charge that he is facing now in trial. So you would think, oh, the evidence is going to be the same. It isn't the same. We're seeing on day 2 evidence that was not shown during the trial of Jennifer Crumley. So stay tuned. You do not want to go anywhere. You're going to want to see this. Yes. So this all stems out of the shooting that their son did. Ethan Crumley took a weapon. Now, let me put this into context. He goes to school that day. James drops him off at school after they've had this argument over him failing one of his classes. They had this argument the night before. And so Ethan had been quite upset. So that morning, James kind of smooths it over with him and drives him to school and sends him off on his merry way. They get a call about 9:30 that he has drawn some illustrations on this math test. The math teacher sees it. She takes a picture of it. He gets the math paper again and he starts scribbling it all out. So there's 2 versions of this math paper. They're called to the counselor's office to see the math paper and talk about their concerns, the school's concerns about their son. The meeting lasts a total of 12 minutes and then they leave. So later on, after lunch, 12:50-ish or so, Ethan Crumley walks into a bathroom, changes his clothing, loads his gun, his 6 Sauer that his dad had just purchased for him the day after Thanksgiving. This is November 30th. He was purchased on November 26th. So 4 days later, Ethan goes in the bathroom, gets this gun out, comes out, and he kills 4 people and injures 7 others. So the state of Michigan is holding these parents responsible for the deaths of those 4 children, for their inactions in this case, and because they had a legal duty to act and they didn't, or because they were just recklessly disregarded the danger that they created by buying this weapon for their son. So like I said, Jennifer's been convicted and this is James's trial. So day 2 of the testimony is today. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that testimony. The first person on the stand is a crime scene investigator, CSI, crime scene investigator. His job after the shooting, after everything's over, Ethan's in custody, he goes out to the crime scene and his job is to collect firearms and firearm-related materials. Now, this shooting started in one end of the 200 hallway and ended in the other end of the 200 hallway. So it started in a bathroom where Ethan Crumley goes into the bathroom, changes his clothes, comes out, starts his shooting, is making his way down this hallway, goes into another bathroom where he kills another student, comes out of that bathroom, takes the magazine out of his gun, sets the gun and the magazine on a trash can, and then proceeds to lay on the ground and then turns himself in. Interesting, huh? Okay, so that's where we're at. So this officer described that. So he gets the firearm. It's on the trash can, takes photographs, gets it in his possession, does whatever they do to the weapon. Puts it in a bag and labels it and all that chain of custody information. Then he said that he found a total of 14 fired cartridge cases in that restroom, outside that first restroom in that hallway. Then you get towards kind of the middle of the hallway and going down the rest of the hallway, which is classrooms 249 through 213. And he said he found another 18 empty cartridge cases. So a total of 32 rounds were fired by Ethan Crumley that day. And he recovered 18 rounds that were not fired. So Ethan brought with him a total of 50 rounds of ammunition to the school that day. So at the time that his parents came to the school, into the school counselor's office, inside Ethan's backpack was a Sig Sauer and 50 rounds of ammunition. We're going to talk more about the counselor tomorrow's episode because counselor's going to be on the stand today. So that was what this officer had to say. The next person on the stand was the bookkeeper from the firearms dealer where James purchased several weapons that year. Now, this was the bookkeeper, but she is also the one that was making these sales to James Crumley. The first sale that she made to James Crumley was on June 15th of 2021 when she sold him a Cobra 22. Now, what she had to do was she asked him for his driver's license, and of course he's to ensure that he's over the age of 21, and he was. Then she has him fill out an application, and then she runs a background check. So that particular day, she told him, your background check's taking, more time. Why don't you come back tomorrow? So he returns on June 16th, and by then he had passed the background check, and he paid for the Cobra, which is $169.95. But on this day, he also purchased a Kel-Tec 22 and 2 boxes of ammunition for a grand total of $349.64. Then James returned with a young man, as it turns out, it's Ethan Crumley, on November 26th, the day after Thanksgiving. While Mom's waiting at home for them to take her Christmas tree shopping, they are purchasing this Sig Sauer. So the woman describes she does the same thing. She gets his driver's license. She has him sign this form. Everyone has to sign this form when they take the weapon. And on that form, he has to swear that, or basically agree that he is not purchasing this weapon for the transfer to another person. Even though we find out later through social media posts that this was a gun he was purchasing for his son as a Christmas present, an early Christmas present. Merry Christmas to you. Okay. Because minors are not allowed to possess a firearm, but they can under certain conditions. And this was brought out on the defense's cross-examination. So I don't know we've seen any footage in this trial yet, but we saw it in Jennifer's trial of Ethan going to the gun range. This is what he and his father like to do. They like to go to the gun range and shoot guns. In that instance, you can possess a firearm if you're, with another adult and you're on the firing range and that kind of thing. Target practice, basically. So she also mentioned that especially the Sig Sauer came with a cable lock. It came in a case and a cable lock, and it came with an ATF, what do they call it? An ATF Youth Handgun Safety Act pamphlet that talks about, keeping this weapon away from teenagers and the dangers of having weapons around teenagers. So this Sig Sauer, again, it came with a cable lock that was not provided by them. The manufacturer gives you a cable lock. Now, we know from pictures that we're going to see throughout this trial that they never even opened the cable lock. It was still in the packaging that it came in after the shooting. So the next person on the stand was Detective Sergeant Joe Bryan. Now, he got involved in this case when he got a call from dispatch to respond to James Crumley's house, because we know from Friday's episode that James called 911. So James was outdoor dashing that afternoon, and this is something he explains to Joe Bryan, because Joe Bryan goes to James Crumley's home. He's there. His wife is there. they're taken down to the police station and put into an interview room next to an interview room where their son is. Yeah. And James explains to him what he did that afternoon. He was door dashing, and he saw fire emergency personnel, just lots and lots of emergency personnel. And he got that active shooter alert over his phone that was sent out by the high school to all the parents in the school, which I thought was, that's a great idea. So he decides, based on knowing that they were just at the school a few hours ago because of this math paper that their son drew with a Sig Sauer on it, bullets on the paper, and someone laying on the ground with blood coming out of them, and him saying, I need help. He's like, oh, let me go home and see if that gun is there. Even though he could have done that after the school meeting, before the school meeting, before the shooting. There were several opportunities, missed opportunities, where James could have gone home to see where that gun was. So anyway, after he knows there's an active shooter, he goes home, finds out the gun is missing, the bullets are missing, and now they're sitting in an interview room with this police officer that is on the stand. Now, we get to see the footage of this, and I would put this in here for you guys to see, but it is difficult to hear. You can make out some of it, like he'll say, like one of the things he said was where he had put the gun, and he said, oh, I put it safely in the and you couldn't understand where he put it. The word that he said, so I figured it out based on the cross-examination by the defense attorney. So I'm going to kind of give you a synopsis of what went on in this room and why we did not see this interview footage during Jennifer Crumley's testimony. And there's a good reason, because her demeanor was not good. She's got her legs crossed and she's on her phone. And they're kind of bickering back and forth, him and her. But he is obviously concerned. So the first thing they do after they've sat down, there's this Bryant, Detective Sergeant Bryant, and then his supervisor is in there with them. So there's 4 people in this room. Little small interview, little small table. James is like, can I have a glass of water? So he goes and gets them both some water, and he comes back and he's like, where was, first he tells them, all right, we've got your son. He's been taken into custody. He's in the next room over. We're interviewing him. He is the shooter. And I'm looking at, like, I would have been, I don't know if they knew this beforehand or they suspected it, but no reaction from Jennifer. None. Like, I think I would be bawling if my son had done something like that. I mean, I don't know how I would react, but I don't think I would have been indifferent about it. And this is why we didn't see this footage in her trial. She's kind of indifferent about it. And that she was asked, do you want to see your son? No, I'm mad at him. Okay. So he did this Brian fellow, he asked James Crumley, where did you keep this weapon? So James said he kept it in an armoire in the case, but they said the bullets were stored completely separate from that underneath some jeans. Never talks about using the cable lock that came with the weapon. Doesn't talk about any kind of locks. Wasn't locked anywhere. And then later on during the interview, we hear that there were 3 magazines and that they were stored separately from the bullets and the guns. Okay. So James talks about how Ethan had, he's a great kid. He's a good kid. He's, mediocre grades. They go up, they go down. But he recently lost his grandmother. He recently lost his dog, a Great Pyrenees. Oh my God, if you guys don't know what a Great Pyrenees is, they're amazing dogs. Oh my gosh, amazing dogs. He lost his dog, And he lost his best friend, who James explained to the interviewer he said his best friend was put into a rehab for OCD. Now, I've never heard of going to rehab for OCD, but, okay, if you say so. And they're not saying the name of this kid, but this is the kid this was his only friend. And they have 20,000 texts between the two of them that went on. So this was his state of mind. He had lost all these people. And then James talks about how they had gotten called to school that day and how they suspected that, he might be the school shooter. And yeah. So, but she genuinely seems, she's got like this pissed off attitude during the whole interview. It just, at one point they're arguing over the bullets. Didn't you? It was 50 bullets. No, it was 200. We bought 2 boxes of bullets. No, you bought 1 box of bullets and it was 50. And they're bickering over this. I'm like, oh, stop. So they were also asked, because they were informed that their son was refusing counsel. And they said, no, we want our son to have a lawyer. So they had to stop the interview so he could go out and tell them and they could get their son a lawyer. They also at one point took Jennifer and James into that second interview room to see their son. Now, that was not shown. That footage was not shown to us. It was shown to the jury. I'm not sure why. But anyway, James is, very concerned, obviously concerned about his son. In fact, he had asked the officer at one point, was he injured? And the officer had told him no. He is telling his son, and kind of in a loud voice, because James or Ethan is talking to his mom. So they're having this conversation and James is like, I love you. And he keeps getting louder about it and he's getting very emotional and he's crying. But it was when the prosecutor talked about it in front of the jury, he made it sound like James was just saying that loudly to cover up his son's voice, who was saying, I did it. I don't know if James is that clever. We'll see. But in any case, that was their interview. And I didn't see anywhere during this interview where they were informed that anyone had lost their lives during this school shooting. So the next person on the stand was Christy Gibson Marshall. She is the assistant principal at Oxford High School. And she talked about how they do this ALICE training and that they've been doing it with the teachers and the students for the last 10 years. And ALICE stands for, A is for alert, L for lockdown, I for inform, C for communicate, and E is to evacuate. Now, she also said that she has known Ethan Crumley for 4 years. That before she became the assistant principal, she was an elementary school teacher, and that's where she first met Ethan Crumley. That seems like more than 4 years, though, doesn't it? Because now he's in 10th grade. Yeah, okay. So she talked about how this was after lunch. The shooting starts around 12:51-ish. So she talks about after lunch, they kind of like mill about amongst the students, just because she likes to mix with the students. She likes them to see her. She likes to know them all by name. And, it's just something she does to connect with the students. But she starts to see that day that there are students running. And she said, this is not, she said, usually when students are rushing around at lunchtime, or, to get in the lunch line or get to lunch early, they're kind of like walking fast. They're not running. She said, these kids were running and some of them were laughing, and she stopped a few and she said, what's going on? And they didn't know. They just were told to get out of there. And one student ran by and said, get the hell out of here. Well, she didn't. About this time, she heard the ALICE alert go over the PA system. Now, at this point, she should have evacuated or hid somewhere. She didn't. Or locked herself down. Didn't do that. She's walking towards the shooter. So now she's leaving the senior area. She's going down this 400 hall. Now you have to go down this straight 400 hall before it splits into a hall that goes east and a hall that goes west. That's the 200 hallway where the shooting starts at one end in the bathroom, goes all the way across into the other end where there's another bathroom. She smells what she thinks is like the smell of a cap gun going off, and she could hear a gun. She says she's not familiar with guns, but she's going towards that because she needed to make sure her students were safe. In fact, one student kind of strayed into that hallway after the Alice alert, and she said, "You need to be locked down." And one of the teachers that was in the process of locking their door, she managed to push that student into that room before the door got locked. She didn't go in. She kept on towards the shooter because she saw what turned out to be Tate Meir lying face down on the ground. So she goes to Tate Meir, she rolls him over, and she sees that he is breathing, or that he has a pulse. He's not breathing, he has a pulse. He's been shot into the back of the head, and it has come out of the front of his head. She said he looked very gray, and at this point she looks up and she sees the shooter and recognizes him to be Ethan Crumley. So she goes towards him because she said Ethan was a good kid. And in her mind, she couldn't separate that, the Ethan, the good kid, with this kid in front of her who has got a gun. This is Ethan Crumley. So she starts to kind of walk with him down the hallway. She's like, "Ethan, are you okay?" He looks at her, he doesn't respond, and he just keeps going. And so at that point, she turns around and she turns her back to him. She says, "I don't know why I did that. I turned my back to him because I needed to go back to Tate." She goes back to Tate. She starts CPR, continues rescue breathing until someone else comes to take over. I don't know if it was the police or EMS, but someone else comes to take over. At some point, she heard, she saw that Ethan had turned himself in. They were trying to figure out who he is, and she said, "Hey, this is Ethan Crumley." She was able to tell everybody this is who it is. How horrible for this woman. Oh my goodness. So at this point, they actually showed the footage, because all of this is on surveillance footage. So they showed the surveillance footage to the jury of what she had just described that she did. And it was not shown to the media, so I don't have that to show you today. But that was the end of the day. That was the end of testimony for Friday. After about 5, almost 6 hours of testimony. So they didn't have a full day on Friday. So the jury got to go home a little bit early on Friday. So they are back in court today. First thing, the school counselor is on the stand. Yeah, this is one you're going to want to hear. I will recap for you tomorrow what that is. So make sure that you like and subscribe. It's going across the screen. There it goes. I will see you guys tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed the recap. And tomorrow we're going to talk about the school counselor and what responsibility did he have that day. Take care, everybody. Bye.